All right, Jack, this is the final top 10, the final one. And it's kind of fitting that we're going to do it, with, I guess, have the conversation with a bunch of guys that are closers, that are closing games out here and some of the best. And it's really hard because there's so much volatility at this position. It's the most volatile position in the sport. That's why a lot of teams, kind of have a revolving door of relievers. But that's why I think with the rankings here, he wanted to try to value. Of course, the most recent year is going to be extremely important. But for me, at least, I can speak to myself. Like when I was ranking guys, yeah, of course, if you're one of the best pitchers, relievers in the sport last year, you're going to be up there. But the guys that have been doing it for a couple years are going to separate themselves because, this position is just volatility 101.
Yes. I think it's important to note that these change all the time. And number 10 on this list may end up being number 2 by the end of the year. And the guy that's medically DQ'd, for my money, is number 1. But it's fascinating to me how quickly all this shit changes. And a guy that was never even sniffing this list. I'm thinking about like a Ryan Tepera or an Aaron Loup. We were talking about those guys getting 3-year deals at the end of the 2021 season. And now they're out of the game pretty much. Tepera, I have no idea where Ryan Tepera is right now. If that guy throws a major league inning, let me know. Shoot me a message and tell me, hey, Ryan Tepera's on the mound for the Oakland A's right now. I love how volatile it is because everybody seems to get their opportunity in the limelight, but it makes some of these guys at the top of this list all the more impressive because they've been there for the last 5 years or so.
No doubt. And we'll dive into some of the things that make them extremely unique. Obviously, we were talking about it before we recorded. A lot of these guys can have great fastballs and great sliders.
Right. We can just say, oh, yeah, sits 98 wipeout shit. Crazy.
Yeah, but we'll try to key in on some things that make them unique. You mentioned the medically disqualified guy and Felix Bautista. He'd be right at the top. It's insane what he can do. It's one of the more uncomfortable at-bats you're going to have from a 6'8", just monster of a man who it looks like he's handing the ball off to the catcher. But honorable mentions, and you want to do evens or odds before I mention the honorable mentions?
What do you want to do? Your choice.
I'll take the evens.
Okay.
So we'll do honorable mentions here. Pete Fairbanks, Jose Alvarado. This is one of those where Fairbanks with Tampa Bay, Alvarado with Philly. I think you could have made the case for Alvarado to be in there. I was kind of surprised to see him come up a little bit short. But then you look at all the other options, and it's like, who are you going to remove? And that's where we were kind of at. Alvarado battled some injuries through last year, but ended up coming back and finishing strong. I think with Alvarado, it's a perfect example of phenomenal last year, but it was only 41 and a third innings, 1.74 ERA is unreal. But 2022 it was a 3.18. 2021 it was a 4.20. And yes, this was his best year, but it was also the smallest workload we've seen from him since 2019. So unfortunately, just missing a little bit of the track record that some of these other guys have.
Yeah, important note with Alvarado, don't call it a sinker. It's a cutter. It sits 93. And the fact that or a slider, pardon. Don't call it a slider. It's a cutter. But he is this, heavy set left-handed arm that is busting 99 in on lefties' hands or working away from righties. And then he runs this mid-90s cutter in on righties, away from lefties. It's so hard. It's so overpowering. He's a fun guy to watch, especially in the postseason when sitting 98 turns into sitting 100. He was the fun one in that bullpen, I'd say, because Kimbrel induced a ton of stress. Dominguez got to be hit or miss at points during the regular season that kind of bled over. Alvarado was the one where it's like, okay, he's on the mound. I feel good.
Absolutely. And Fairbanks, another guy that, when healthy,
it's just been great.
Last season and change, we had 45 and a third innings this past year, and then 24 the year before that. You combine that, you got 69 and a third of 2.08 ERA, 25 saves last year and 49 appearances, and the guy struck out a ridiculous amount. Nearly 14 batters per 9. Again, I think just a little bit more of the workload wasn't there. The other guys we're going to talk about it, we're doing this over more innings, more save opportunities, we're just more pitches thrown. That's going to matter. It's got to matter here, especially when we're already using small sample sizes because they're relievers. There's a big difference between 70 innings and 45 innings. versus, when we're talking starters, 160 innings versus 135 innings.
Yes.
That's a big difference too, but not nearly as big, relatively speaking. So that's what keeps Fairbanks just out, a guy that could be easily in the top 10. But that leads us to the top 10, which is me, right? I'm doing evens here. So I'll jump in here. Number 10 on the top relievers list is Andres Munoz of the Seattle Mariners. And Munoz, phenomenal year, yet again, 52 appearances, 13 saves, 49 innings, a 2.94 ERA. Underlying numbers liked him even more, a 2.70 FIP, more than 12 strikeouts per nine. He can get a little bit wild here and there, but keeps it in check enough, 4 walks per nine. And, you look across the board, I would say most of us were in the same area, except for Leo. Leo had him at 15, one of our editors in Leo Morgenstern, but you had him at 9, I had him at 9, Pete had him 11, Fink had him at 8, and Colby had him at 8. There's some diabolical stuff here, and it's going to be the classic fastball slider, yeah, but this slider can be a nightmare for hitters.
That's the thing that jumps out to me about Munoz. Everybody gravitates towards the gun with him because he is up there with Yohan Duran and Felix Bautista and Emmanuel Clase when it comes to consistently grabbing 100 miles an hour. Munoz can run it up to like 102, 103. But 102, 103 is not his best pitch. It's the slider that's his best pitch that works off of it. That's 92 to 93. So a guy that is, making headlines and is blowing up Twitter because he hit 103 miles an hour, and the fact that you can call that his second best pitch lands him on this list alone. Because who throws 103 and that's not their bread and butter? It's him and Duran. Duran is 103, but that splitter's his best pitch. And obviously we're going to talk about Yohan Duran. Not right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations where I'll blow by you, but you're almost, I don't even know what you do in this kind of at bat. Do you just key in on the fastball and hope you get it?
Yeah.
He probably picked up on that because he ends up throwing the slider 50% of the time last year. So the slider is too good of a pitch for guys to be able to sit on and really try to hit. He allowed 2 home runs on it last year. And for the most part, just even if you got it, it was going to be weak on the ground. The average the 50th percentile exit velocity on a slider last year was below 87 miles an hour. It's just that's just crazy stuff. But then again, you're a sitting slider, then he's going to blow 99 or 100 by you. 11 miles per hour in separation between the slider and the fastball is huge here because I think a lot of guys it's hard and harder, and this is still technically hard and harder, but there's a lot of separation there where if you're sitting fastball, you're going to get ugly swing off. And if you're sitting slider, you're toast if it's a fastball. And that's why Munoz has dominated hitters for a while now. But what kind of puts the icing on the cake for me is 32% strikeout rate, 58% ground ball rate. You get the best of both worlds here with Munoz. So unlikely to, blow saves or blow games when, you also are able to get that contact on the ground.
100%. But let's jump to number 9 here. And number 9 is Alexis Diaz of the Cincinnati Reds. Alexis Diaz is the big little brother of Edwin Diaz, 27 years old. This guy threw all the time, 71 appearances last year, 37 saves, was near the top of the National League. In 67 and third, he had an ERA just a little bit over 3. The FIP was good. He punched out 11 and a half guys per 9, and he accumulated almost 2 WAR. Same deal. We all kind of had him in the same range except for Leo. I think Leo ranked 15. He probably had Alexis Diaz like 16. The thing that jumps out about Alexis Diaz is it's not 100 by any stretch. It's for the most part 94 to 95 that he sits with a 4-seamer. The slider is one of the better sliders in all of baseball. Starting pitcher, relief pitcher. Opponents last year against the slider hit a .53. They slugged under 230 against the slider. What he does delivery-wise is almost identical to Big Bro. And Big Bro's slider might be the best slider in all of baseball. And I don't have the extension numbers in front of me, but I have to assume that the extension is crazy and the arm angle is crazy. And the way that those guys jump forward on the mound and snap that shit off is unlike any other pitcher in baseball.
The extension's elite.
Is it? Yeah.
MLB average extensions around like 6.5 feet. He's 7.7.
They pretty much do, Edwin and Alexis pretty much do the Carter Capps thing where they just like jump forward on the mound.
It's pretty damn close. It's like, because they banned that, so they pretty much toe the line quite literally of what they're allowed to do there, and that causes the fastball to get on a lot quicker. Of course, Diaz is arguably the most unhittable pitcher in the sport or Edwin, I should say.
Yeah, Edwin.
Because he does that at 100. And you mentioned the velocities, more, I would say 93, 95, more 94, I would say 94, 95 can grab six and change. But he also has a low release. And with that extension, it still gets on you like it's upper 90s. With Edwin, it gets on you like it's
110,
105. Yeah, like something crazy like that. But, that extension, I think the low release really allows the slider to play up off of that. And it's just a nightmare for hitters. I think the numbers are only going to get better and better for him. And, again, this is another guy that he had a couple little blips, but it ultimately settled in and had a good year. But if you look at 2022, a 1.84 ERA, yes, the numbers weren't as great in 23, but I think when you look at the 2 years, the body of work, he's not slowing down anytime soon.
You don't often see reliever extensions. When you do see them, they tend to come in small markets. Emmanuel Clase got extended by Cleveland. I think Alexis Diaz in Cincinnati is a perfect extension candidate. I think David Bednar at Pittsburgh is a perfect extension candidate. Those two guys in the NL Central get in on the ground floor and make them lifers in their small marketplace.
I agree with you. And another guy that could end up being an extension candidate is Camilo Doval with the San Francisco Giants, because it's getting hard to justify. Yeah, I think not, or I would say it's getting hard to believe that he's not going to continue to do this year in and year out. So the number 8 reliever in Major League Baseball is Camilo Doval. 2023 was just another good year for him. And he just seems safe, comfortable. Your heart rate's not really high at all when he comes into the game. Even when he gets in a jam, you feel like he's going to get out of it. 69 games, 39 saves, 67 and 2/3 innings, a 2.93 ERA. The underlying numbers like him even more, a 2.77 FIP, 11 and a half strikeouts per 9, 3.5 walks per 9, and nearly a 2 F4 there, right at 1.9. Leo, again, the low guy, has him at 10, though. Everybody else had him anywhere from 7 to 9. 7 was the most popular rank with myself, Peter, and Colby. You had him at 8. I mean, Doval is just another one of those guys that the ball just explodes out of his hand. And that's kind of a prerequisite to be on this top 10. But with the hard cutter and then this fastball that just gets on you, it's one of those things where I just don't know what you do in these kind of at-bats. You guess for one, similarly to what we were talking about before, and just hope you get it. But the difference is he'll mix in some sinkers and he'll mix in some cutters. Like, he'll just give you different looks. The slider with more sweep, a cutter that's closer to the upper 90s, the fastball that's averaged 100 last year, by the way, and then a sinker that's like 98. He can give you more looks. Of course, the majority of the looks you're going to get are going to be sinker, four seam, and slider. But the fact that he can just sprinkle in some other stuff makes it really hard to even guess. And, your best chance is just guessing against this guy.
Well, it's a guessing game more than any other pitcher that we've talked about to this point, because the slider usage, I've got at 36%. Where do you have the slider usage? Probably mid-30s, right?
Yeah, right around there.
So that's a mid-30, and that's his most often used pitch. He's got a 3-pitch mix. So we're looking at 36% slider. I'm looking at 33% four-seam cutter, and then I'm looking at 30% sinker. Like, just pick. It's hard to eliminate two, because chances are you see those two if you can ID which two that you eliminate. And he's not going to miss enough to run himself into trouble. I think this guy is one of the better young relievers that we've got in the game. And you can see the year-by-year improvement. Yeah. This guy will jump into the top 5 at some point, it does seem.
Yeah, and as I said, the track record's there, right? We saw him debut at 23, end up pitching in the postseason, put up great numbers there in 2021, and then 2022 was just dynamite. The 2.53 ERA. The ERA goes up a little bit, and it's funny, 67 and 2/3 innings in 2022, 67 and 2/3 innings in 2023. But you mentioned he's gotten better every year. He was better last year than he was in 22. You look at the underlying metrics, you look at the swing and miss numbers, you look at the walk numbers, they were all better. The thing with the reliever, you give up a couple home runs, and that can make the difference of the 2.53 and the 2.93. Underlying was great. He had more saves, same workload, and again, more strikeouts, less walks, less homers. He's going to be a dude, and the fact that he continues to get better, he already is a dude, but the fact that he keeps getting better at 26 years old, look out. And you got to eliminate the sinker and the cutter probably if you're a hitter. And so you're sitting slider or fastball, and then the probability just swings into his favor when he also can sprinkle in those other pitches. Another guy that, because of that sinker, when he's not striking you out, he can get a lot of ground balls, 52% ground ball rate last year.
Yeah. Let's jump to number 7 here. And number 7 is Lafayette College alum David Bednar of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I love the backstory about David Bednar. This guy was a 35th round pick out of Lafayette College. Is Lafayette D3? I think it is.
Disrespectful, Patriot League.
Sorry. Oh, Patriot League. That's my bad. What the hell? I didn't think I would make those mistakes, but here I am. 29-year-old native Pittsburgher, undrafted out of high school. He goes to Lafayette. He shoves, but even then, like, you don't get the respect there, so he's a later round pick. This guy, in turn, becomes this dominant reliever, and he flies through the minor leagues. And David Bednar last year, we're talking about a guy that had an ERA right at 2 flat. He had just under 11 punch-outs per 9. He wasn't walking anybody in the front half. I think walks per 9 was under 1. It finished under 3. And he is constantly on the mound. 67 1/3. He was a 2.5 win player as a closer. The book on Bednar the last 2 years is that they will use him until he is literally exhausted. And it resulted in injury in 2022. But Bednar is willing to take that on. He is now a multi-time All-Star. He is a workhorse. They love him in Pittsburgh. He should absolutely be extended by the Pittsburgh Pirates if they see him as the closer of the future, and they damn well should see him as the closer of the future. The fastball is mid-90s. It's not high 90s. If you can key me into the shape, I don't understand why no one can touch that thing. And he is a hefty guy. He comes from a slot that is pretty much overhead. He's got that fastball that he locates so well at the top of the zone, and then he snaps off a true curveball. And that 1-2 punch of the fastball curveball is disgusting.
Yeah, it's just a tunneling nightmare for hitters, and that's been abundantly clear. But you mentioned just the track record here. You got 3 years now after a couple shaky stints with the Padres, gets over to Pittsburgh and a 2.23, a 2.61, and then the 2 flat. The other thing is just keeping the ball in the yard. The home run to fly ball rate just dwindling by year and only at 4%, 3.8% last year is extremely impressive, especially when you're a guy that likes to buzz the fastball, as you mentioned, at the top of the zone and then snap that breaking ball off of it. I mean, to show you in terms of the shape, it's 18 inches of vert, which is slightly above big league average, but he gets slightly more extension. The big thing for him is the vertical approach angle. So his angle is super flat, just the way that the ball comes out of his hand, and it just makes for emphasized carry that you're not going to see on the sliders on Savant. We don't have BAA on Savant, but that's something that really exacerbates the carry and also exacerbates the tunneling effect when you have that downer curveball as well, and then the split that he'll mix in there as well. It just seems like riding upwards, 2 things that look like the fastball until it's too late and bite downwards. Good luck. And that's the type of arsenal that's not going to have any platoon splits.
No.
When it's vertical, everything's vertical, you're going to be able to get lefties and righties out similarly. Righties hit 211, lefties hit 220, and that's why he is as consistent as they come.
I love the North-South guys. Marco Estrada was the first one that I fell in love with. This is much better than Marco Estrada because Marco Estrada was like 88 and then 77 with the changeup. This is, I've got that at the top of the zone and I'm going to snap hell off. The sticky version of James Karinchak was my favorite reliever to watch because he was north-south, and it was, I'm going to spin a 3,000 RPM fastball and then like a 3,000 RPM curveball off of that, and you are not going to touch it. And as much as you can do without the tack, that's what David Bednar is doing.
Yes, absolutely. And Karinchak's is about as vertical as they come. So that's a great example of that, but made for some really, really uncomfortable at-bats. That brings us into number 6 here. And kind of, like, somewhat polarizing on our rankings. Brian Abreu, the Houston Astros, checks in. I mean, what this guy did in the postseason through stretches was utterly insane. But at the same time, like, you got to start looking at what he's done the last 2 years. And I mean, look, I know he's not closing games out, and there is some, value that we baked into that when you're picking up saves.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're talking about a sub-2 ERA over the span of 132 and a thirds innings for the Astros.
2 years.
2 years, we have a 1.84 ERA. I mean, that is all I need for a guy to be in the top 10. His stuff is diabolical. Like, in terms of just swings that guys get off, I don't know if there's a guy that gets more like, pitching ninja swords out there that we're going to talk about, maybe other than one or two of the guys at the top. But in terms of guys outside of the top 5, Abreu's up there with anybody. It just seems like everything is going in a different direction. And I don't know what it is from a data standpoint that makes him so tough. I think it's that the curveball is just, you don't see curveballs in like the mid 80s, so it's like a power curve.
Right.
The slider, of course, is just disgusting and tough to pick up. I think separating from the fastball, and then the fastball, just the life on it, it's just something that I don't know. It might just be hard to quantify. That it just seems to just get on hitters and make them miserable. But Abreu had some of the more insane stretches we've seen, if you even spilled it into the postseason. And I don't know if we've really seen guys like Abreu very often put together stretches like that, especially relievers with the volatility of the position. Yes, we see really dominant seasons, but it's hard to remember a guy that's had the sub-2 for 2 straight years like that. And then also the stretch of like nobody reaching base or like no runs scored for so long spilling into the postseason.
A couple of notes when it comes to Brian Abreu's ranking. Colby didn't rank him. Colby had him up.
That's insane.
That's like, come on, man. We talked about it with the starting pitchers. Like,
was that an oversight? Could that have been? Did he forget?
It could have been. I don't know, man. Like, maybe he sorted by saves and looked that way. I don't know how you missed that. But he did save 5 games. Peter had him at 6. Do you remember the conversation we had during the postseason? I think it was actually on Twitter. I could probably go back in my tweets and I could look at it. Peter said that he would rather have Brian Abreu than Felix Bautista on the mound. And I was like,
say that.
Yeah, he said that. And he was like fully convinced during the postseason. And the thing is, like, is that a knee-jerk reaction? Yes. Did I understand it a little bit in the moment? Yes, I did. Like, immediacy is a hell of a drug, but it's also like, dude, what he was doing in the postseason, he did look like the best reliever in baseball.
I mean, in the postseason, it was some rare stuff. Like, he did look like nobody had a chance. It reminded me of like when you have the mature, like, little leaguer that just looks like a man compared to everybody else, just comes in, no one has a chance. That's what he looked like through stretches. So, I mean, now you have 130 innings of work to highlight as well.
To back it up, yeah.
It's hard to justify. And on basically any other team, he's racking up saves. So I don't care about the saves as much here. I think people do look at like the left on base percentage, things like that. But I also think that's a testament to the stuff when you're a reliever. And I mean, the stuff, I'd stack his up with anybody, and he's still just 26 years old. I think the fact that he also has that banger curveball that he doesn't throw in that much, but throws it in just enough, is what kind of just makes it even more difficult to figure out what you're going to do against a guy like him.
It's utterly insane to me that you mentioned 26 years old. He's entering his age 27 season. He'll be 27 for the majority of the year. Still has all 3 years of arbitration ahead of him. He's making 1.75 this year in his first arb year. The Astros they have like the discount of all discounts. If this guy somehow hit the open market at this point, he's a 9-figure closer. He's getting an $100 million deal. I do believe that because of what he's done the last.
You think Abreu can get that?
If he hit the open market right now at 26 years old.
Sick. I mean, he'd be getting a big check for sure.
Last 2 years, sub-2, he sits 98. He's got that curveball that you mentioned, and the slider is so good. Like, how are you paying him? I mean, if Hader just got 100, then you give him 100 too.
Yeah, he should be in the top 5 then. But again, I think Colby just kind of like tanked. He probably would have been ahead of number 5.
I would think so. Last thing on Brady real quick. He throws like he wants to punch you in the face. And I'm in on that. Like, he's a menacing human being, and he throws like he is, gonna beat the shit out of you later. All right, number 5 on this list is Emmanuel Clase of the Cleveland Guardians. And it's crazy that Clase only checks in at 5. This guy was throwing all the time, 72 and 2/3 innings. He made 75 appearances and 44 saves. The problem is, this guy was going to be number 1 or number 2 on like every list for the last, after 2021, after 2022. The problem with 2023 is we saw the Ks tick down drastically. And he might have been living too much in the strike zone. He wasn't walking anybody, 2 walks per 9. But for a guy that sits 101 with a cutter to only punch out 7.5, 8 guys per 9, it doesn't make much sense at all. Having said that, this guy, even though he was in the zone a lot, still managed a 3.2 ERA. FIP was under 3, and he was nearly a 2-win reliever. Clase fascinates me because the K numbers aren't there. It is more fascinating to me than Gratterall. Because Gratterall, I kind of get it, right? You can track the sinker. You just bludgeon the ball into the ground against Gratterall. With Clase, that shit's moving, man. Like, it's cutting. It's a slider. I just don't understand where the Ks were this past year.
So I think it's almost the same thing as we're talking about with like the changeup sinker guys.
It's the same movement. It's just different speeds.
And because Clase's cutter or fast, it'll get labeled as fastball. It's a cutter. It's a gyro cutter, meaning that it breaks downward. So having that gyro cut to it, and sometimes it'll have a little bit more horizontal, but it'll usually have a gyro break to it. That's why you see the 58% ground ball rate. But then the slider, it's a little bit more horizontal, but it's still got a little bit of vertical drop to it. So he's got that similar situation where everything's kind of at the bottom of the zone. The thing is, though, is you're not going to be able to square this up. Like it's just when it's 99 with like gyro cut, good luck. It's like Graham Ashcraft, we're talking about that. Like, it's a similar shape. And that's why those guys get a lot of ground balls, but you may not get quite as much whiff. There's another guy that it's just not going to happen because I think that he naturally cuts. But if he's able to, elevate, if he was able to elevate a little bit more, and he still does elevate the cutter, like it'll back up and it'll be really good for him. But he just wasn't able to do that with consistency. I think it was a lot of times by accident. That's why I don't think there was as much whiff. But that said, dude, like I feel so safe with Clase because even his quote unquote down years, or like where he's not getting as much of the lights out whiff as we're used to, he's just so solid because he's going to get a lot of weak contact. He's going to fill up the zone. He doesn't walk anybody, 5% walk rate, and it's mostly on the ground. So yeah, it was not his best performance that we've seen, but he's just such a shoo-in to just be a solid arm for you and a solid high leverage arm. But I want to see him get back. He's got to miss some more bats to get back to that elite closer role.
100%. The cutter, I love it because 2019, I've got samples from 2019, 21, 22, 23. And he is, for the most part, like 60 to 70% usage with that high 90s, 100 mile an hour cutter. This guy's average launch angle against that pitch. In 2019, it was 3 degrees. In 2021, -2 degrees. In 2022, -3 degrees. In 2023, -2 degrees. That speaks to the safety you're talking about. You know this guy is just going to get a 60% ground ball rate when he rolls out of bed. And he could be 97 with that cutter. He could be 95 with that cutter. It really helps that it's 102. But like when he's 31 years old and he's sitting 96, he's still going to induce that 60% ground ball rate because it's going to be one of the heavier cutters in baseball still. The only way this guy turns into a finicky, volatile reliever is if that cutter goes away. And it's hard to think that cutter ever goes away.
That's natural for him. And I think that was just the difference. Yeah, we saw less swing and miss, and that's the difference between what, a 1.29 in 2021, a 1.36 in 2022, and then the 3.2.
And then a 3.2, yeah.
But I think the other thing we got to talk about is the usage, like how much he has been used. I don't think anybody's been used more in terms of appearances in the last 3 years than Clase, right? Where it's 71 games in 21, 77 games in 22, 75 games in 23. I mean, that is outrageous usage. And to do that with not even a sub 2 ERA the first 2 years, We're talking a sub 1.5 ERA, like a 1.29 and a 1.36. So yes, it was a little bit of a step back last year, but even then, still solid. I think he's going to be somewhere between what we saw, last year and what we became used to the first 2 years, which with high usage is still a top 5 reliever in this game at the very least.
I'm looking it up right now. I got to do not qualified. I'm going to do minimum 5 innings pitched, most appearances since the start of the 2021 season. Emmanuel Clase is literally number 1 by a decently fair margin, by 7 appearances. He's made 223 appearances since the start of the 2021 season. Tyler Rogers is second. Hector Neris is third. AJ Minter fourth. Scott Barlow fifth. There are only 10 guys that have made 200 or more appearances since the start of 2021. Clase is at 223. So he's on a different level. And they constantly go to him, and he constantly answers the call, which is cool.
That is awesome. And that leads us into number 4. A guy that is constantly been there, though he just won't do it back to back very often. Josh Hader is a number 4 reliever in Major League Baseball, now on the Houston Astros as well. We're talking about 2, the best relievers in baseball on this Astros team. It's going to be scary. But Hader, it feels like he's been around longer than he has. I feel like because he's been one of the best closers, if not the best, through stretches for a long time now. I mean, we're going back to 2017, where even when he wasn't picking up saves, he was dynamite for the Milwaukee Brewers. Pretty much ever since he's made the switch from starter to reliever, it was game over. Like, it was just lights out, disgusting stuff. This guy as a major leaguer, and now we've got a pretty good sample size here. 388 and 2/3 innings as a major leaguer. 15 strikeouts per 9. And we had whatever the hell 2022 was from him, that 5.22 ERA. But if you look at the underlying metrics there too, 3.45 FIP, 2.94 xFIP, even the xERA 3.51. It was a bad year. Don't get me wrong. The underlying numbers were better. And then you look at what he did last year, he's back. And that's why the Astros paid him a lot of money to close games for them this coming season. 56 and a third innings, a 1.28 ERA last year. What he did for the Padres was ridiculous. Kept the ball in the yard better than he ever did. I mean, you could argue that, I know it was less innings, and we've seen him go 81 and 75 innings, in the first couple of years of his career. But you could argue, statistically speaking, that this was the best year of his career in 2023. Either that or 2021. But they're both pretty darn close here. You can't argue that it's not one of the best 3 seasons of his career. So that's what made me really confident. Yeah, it looked like we were seeing maybe a decline a little bit of Hader, but then he turns around and gives you one of the best seasons of his career. Astros go out and pay him. He's back, and he's one of the best in the game.
I'm going to make the argument that 2023 was actually the second worst year of his career. I'm kidding. 2022, opponents hit 225 against him. What do you think the second highest batting average against him in his career is?
Second highest. So what was last year?
Well, I'm not going to tell you, because last year was actually the second highest batting average against.
Sorry, what'd you say the lowest was?
So the highest was 225.
Highest was 225.
In 2022. 2023, opponents hit for the second best clip they ever have against Hader in his career. What do you think that clip was?
192?
163.
Oh my gosh.
I'm going to run you through this. The only year that he wasn't an all-star was his rookie year. In his rookie year in 2017, across 47 and 2/3 innings, opponents hit 156. After that, 2018, opponents hit a $132 against him in 81 and a third. In 75 and 2/3 in 2019, opponents hit 155 against him. 19 innings in 2020, opponents hit a $123. 58 and 2/3 in 2021, they hit a $127. 163 is the second highest batting average against Josh Hader in his career.
So the second highest batting average basically was Mike Gold.
Yeah, Mike Gold. Opponents had a 508 OPS against him this past year.
It's insane.
It's nuts.
That is so crazy.
2021, 2021 opponents had a 421 OPS against him.
So even his bad year, that's what I'm saying. Like that's where the underlying metrics are pretty good. Like you're still looking at a year where it's like, the ERA wasn't great. It seemed like a mental thing for him more than anything.
Totally.
It seemed like it was mental compounding. In terms of the release and the extension that he gets, and just the way that he looks like he gets more extension than I think. I don't know what it is, because it looks like the ball gets on hitters way quicker, but the extension's pretty run of the mill. He must hide the ball well. It's slingshot delivery. It just gets on hitters so quickly. He averages 19 inches of vert. It just seems like, 19 inches from a 5.65 release height is pretty insane. Yeah. So he's just getting elite carry. The slider tunnels off of that. And then, that's all he needs. If you're a lefty, why even swing? But the funny thing is the last couple of years, he's actually had better numbers against righties, which almost like breaks my brain because the slider is his pitch. But this guy is a monster. So I feel like he's just going to be good as long as he's able to live in the mid 90s. And seems like he's fine living in the mid 90s as long as he doesn't throw back to backs too often.
But this cat was running to Milwaukee because they might have had somebody better. And the number 3 guy on our list is Devin Williams of the Milwaukee Brewers. And it's crazy to think that guy could be better. But on a pitch-by-pitch basis, right now, I think the answer is Devin Williams might be the better closer. Devin Williams this past year, opponents hit 097 against the Airbender. He threw it 58% of the time. And then he threw the fastball 40% of the time. Opponents hit 177 against him. Devin Williams, 36 saves, a 1.53 ERA, 13.5 punch-outs per 9. Leo had him 1. Understandably so. Man, that changeup, is that the best pitch in baseball?
I was going to ask you the same thing. I said, how many pitches are you taking over Devin Williams' changeup?
No, you do the build your perfect quarterback. Everybody's taking Lamar's scrambling ability. Everybody's taking Tom Brady's, leadership. Everybody's taking Mahomes' arm. If you're building a perfect arsenal, you're not taking another changeup outside of Devin Williams's. That could be the number 1 pitch off the board. I want Devin's changeup. And I wouldn't blame you if that was the number 1 pitch off the board.
We should do that one day. And it probably should be because he had a 23% swinging strike rate. What do you think? Do you have it in front of you? Like what opponents hit against his changeup last year?
097.
Yeah. No, I wanted to see if you would guess. I would never have guessed anything below 100, even with his changeup. It's a screwball, really.
Yeah.
It's almost like I've actually asked a couple of hitters who have faced him, and they've said it's like a left-handed slider. But the problem is it's even harder to pick up because it's a changeup, and the changeup's the hardest pitch to be able to pick up and separate from the fastball. And because of that, the fastball plays up. Maybe nothing's insane about his fastball. It's some decent shape to it. Once he made the move from reliever to starter, similar to Josh Hader, it ticked up and it became a better pitch for him. But he gets off the chart, in-zone whiff numbers on his fastball because hitters are so domed up by that changeup. That's all he needs. And there's a reason why he throws the changeup almost 60% of the time and has no issue with it. And when you throw a pitch almost 60% of the time and hold opponents below a 100 batting average, that's got to be the best pitch in baseball, or at least top 3.
No, there are very few pitches that you can't do shit with. And one of them is Felix Bautista's splitter. Like I don't see a world where a hitter can make contact with Felix Bautista's splitter. And of course it happens because it's baseball. Like, hey, 1 out of 10 hitters gets a hit against Devin Williams' changeup. I don't know how that works. But Devin's changeup, Bautista's splitter might be the 2 pitches that I'm like, I don't get it. And the other pitch might belong to number 2.
Yep, exactly. That was what I was about to say too. Number 2, John Duran, the Minnesota Twins. His splitter, but put that up there, that splinker, whatever the hell that thing is, that demon pitch, you could put it up there with anybody. 26 years old. Amazing how many of these relievers are young as well. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. So maybe the volatility around this position may start to slow a little bit. 59 games, 27 saves, 62 and a third innings, a 2.45 ERA. The underlying didn't love him as much, but still love him. 3.21 FIP, 12 strikeouts per 9, fills up the zone at a pretty good clip, 3.5 walks per 9. But he averaged 102 miles an hour with his fastball. Then you have that splinker that averaged 98.5 miles per hour. And, those 2 pitches alone would be fine. And it could just be hard and harder. It's really extremely hard and harder. But he also has a curveball at 88. And that curveball probably looks like a Zach Greinke ephus after seeing 102 and then seeing a splitter at 98.5. So that's what makes him, I think, incredibly unique, is that everyone wants to talk about the splinter and wants to talk about a fastball that averages 102, and for good reason. But when you can also snap a curveball that has the depth that it has and gets the numbers that it gets, opponents at 135 against it last year, good fucking luck.
This is what we wanted Alex Reyes to be, but like bigger and more powerful. Alex Reyes was a top 25 prospect in baseball at his peak.
Mm-hmm.
Top 20.
That's a guy that the Marlins wanted in the Ozuna trade, and I think that the Cardinals were like, no way, take Sandy instead.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Reyes was arguably a top 3, top 2 pitching prospect in all of baseball at a point because it was power stuff, because it was a pitch mix. All of a sudden, he moves to the bullpen, and you guys all remember that one season where he was the Cardinal closer, and it was disgusting. It looked like we were witnessing the start of a Hall of Fame career, and it's like, wow, starting pitching prospect learned how to close games. It's not Chapman because Chapman was limited to a 2-pitch mix. He added a third, and it's disgusting. But Duran is starter, closer. And he's got that starter arsenal still that, like, you consolidate into an inning, and 99 became 103. And that 84-mile-an-hour curveball became 88. And that splinter at 96 became 99, 100. He's the guy that, like, in a shorter sample is like, oh, I can just empty the tank. He is the best example of mentally emptying the tank, and he physically empties the tank across an inning, and it is the most dominant inning. If Jacob Mizorowski was a closer, he would look like Yohan Duran.
And that's the thing. He has that fallback, and now there's the track record of Brewers, converting failed starters to relievers and becoming what they've become. I think you bring up an excellent point, though, here, dude, is aside from who we're going to get to in number one, a lot of the best closers are former starters. And I hate to say failed starters because it doesn't mean that they would have totally failed. Yohan Duran may not have failed as a starter, but he might have been a 4, because the command would have been like Edward Cabrera leveled up, which is a little frustrating. Or instead, you have the best closer, arguably the number 2 closer in Major League Baseball. Like, that's more valuable. You got to figure that out, though, and make that decision. But the guys that were former starters, they seem to just fill up the zone a little bit better. They're not really a 2-pitch pitcher as much. And if they are, then they command the heck out of those 2 pitches. If you look at number 4, 3, and 2 are all converted starters. And Class A too. Class A wasn't Class A a starter as well?
I think in Texas, and he failed when he got popped for PEDs, and then he came back and he was out of the pen. So
5, 4, 3, 2. I don't know most guys are starters, but we're talking about guys that started pretty deep into their minor league career. We're not saying, they were starter, in low A for a few games. These were guys that started for a while, and then ultimately made the switch. And I don't think it's a coincidence that those guys end up being some of the best closers that you end up finding in the sport, which actually leads us into the best closer, who is one of the exceptions to what we were just saying.
He did start through his high A career, and he was kind of like a swingman in Double A. His first full year of being a closer was his first year in the major leagues. But the guy that we're talking about is Edwin Diaz of the New York Mets, which is crazy considering he didn't throw a single pitch in the major league regular season in 2024. Obviously, you had that horrible leg injury in the World Baseball Classic, and that just sucked the life out of it.
That's the closest I've been to throwing up from in an occurrence that wasn't visibly gross. You know what I'm saying? I've just been to nauseated from a circumstance that didn't directly affect me.
Yeah, situationally, it was why the hell is this happening? It's the way that I can kind of look at it is Paul George, when he snapped his leg during that USA basketball scrimmage, Paul George was an MVP candidate at that point. So it's not only are you concerned about the guy and feel so bad for the guy because he just got hurt in a very bad way, but it's this just took away an entire year of this guy maybe being the best at his craft in the world.
Yes.
And Edwin Diaz, we lost a year of him being the best closer in the world because of that. And I understand how miserable that was in person for you, because I was watching it on TV and I was like, God damn it, this sucks.
Yeah, sitting in that, and it's just waiting for any update in the post game press box area. It was crazy, and you just weren't getting much. But That said, like people were like, oh, okay, how is he still number one off of a knee surgery? Well, the arm's fresh.
Yeah.
My concern was like, how is he going to drive off the rubber? How is he going to land? And we've seen already he's more than comfortable. He's more than good. He had plenty of time to get back. There was a possibility that he could have made it back at the end of last season if they made the playoffs. They don't, obviously. So he gets way more time to ramp up properly. I'm pretty sure Uncle Stevie Cohen made sure that he had everything he needs.
Yeah, you go to what, Cedar Sinai?
Yeah, like he's all good. And you brought up a good point, though. He was a starter, man. He was starting games up until Double-A. So it continues the point that almost all of these guys that are the best didn't abandon starting until maybe the upper levels, which, I think is important here. He had 1 9-inning start in low A in Clinton, which is pretty funny, but plenty of 7 6-inning outings, including a few at the Double-A level. But just getting back to the point here is the reason why he's number one is it's going into 2024, who we think, how we think they're going to stack up. I don't think anybody's going to be better than Edwin Diaz. And now he has a fresh arm. If the knee's feeling good, I mean, he's been sitting 97 in spring training, and I bet you he's, in terms of like, I don't think he's even trying to let it go in terms of like, some of the bullpens he's been throwing, things like that. I think by the time he comes back, he's gonna be sitting, close to the triple digits number and flirting with. And when we've seen him sitting 99 the last couple years, and I think now we're gonna see him pretty much right back there. He might even flash some higher numbers, as he gets back into the flow of things because of how fresh he probably feels.
Yeah. I'll remind you of the numbers because they're really fun. In 2022, he had a 1.31 ERA and a FIP under 1, a 0.9 FIP, 118 punch-outs to 18 walks in 62 innings, 17.1 strikeouts per 9. Opponents had an OPS of 446 against him. This is a number that I don't think I've ever seen. A 50% K rate in 2023. Yeah. Have you ever seen that at any level?
No. I'm trying to think. I mean, I've seen short stints of just dominant prospects that can get it into the mid 40s, maybe. Striking out half of the major league hitters you face is the epitome of just overpowering.
And not in 32 innings, in 62 innings.
That's the equivalent of 17 strikeouts per 9. Think about that.
Yes.
There's 27 outs to get. That is crazy. And the last thing I'll mention is 22 opponents at $157, but the slider opponents at $110. But I think even more impressive is that they had an OPS under 300.
Yeah, give me the slug. I've got the slug in front of me.
It's 130.
Opponents slugged 130.
Slugged 130. That means, so you know what it was? It was 1 home run on that slider.
In 149 ABs that ended in a slider, 1 homer, no doubles, no triples.
You know who hit the home run? Any guess? It's hard to just pull out of your ass. I'll say traded from the National League to the American League and is an outfielder.
Traded from the NL to the AL is an outfielder.
Kind of stunk last year, relatively speaking.
I don't know.
Dalton Varsho had the 1 home run.
I love that.
103 off the bat there.
Man.
Think about that. 1 home run. And that was the only extra base hit. That was the only extra base hit he gave up on a slider that he throws 57% of the time. That, we talk about best pitch of baseball. That's probably the number 2 pitch I'm drafting. It might be number 1. I might draft that before Devin Williams.
I'll take the Airbender first, but Diaz.
32% swinging strike rate, Jack.
I know, but like opponents hit 0.97 against that changeup. It's so crazy.
That is crazy. Those 2 pitches, man. If you could put a pitcher together with those 2, and then Diaz's fastball too. I mean, what opponents are they're probably hitting 0.50, maybe worse.
So Cristiano Ronaldo has, he's from Madeira, which is an island off the coast of Portugal. The airport is Cristiano Ronaldo Airport. If a pitcher had Edwin Diaz's slider and Devin Williams' changeup, he would have an airport named after him.
Yes. I think that's a perfect way to describe that. But Diaz, I think he's keeping number 1, and or at least he's here to retake it for those who don't think he has the number one spot off of that knee issue because, like I said, he's going to be fresh. And hopefully it'll be a nice little jolt for the Mets this year.
Yep.
That's it. That was eventful going through all these top tens, but I'm it's fun. I love doing it every year, but by the time we get to the end, I'm just so excited to preview teams, start getting into over/under win totals, all that good stuff. So we will be doing that very soon. Jack, you could probably talk a little bit about the schedule we have moving forward because you are the schedule.
The schedule czar?
Yeah, you are the schedule czar. I do want, before I kick it to you to do that, tease the call up. Yes, we've got some crazy interviews. I mean, I just put out conversation with Rhett Lauder, Benny Montgomery, and we're talking about first round picks galore, by the way. Rhett Lauder, Benny Montgomery, Robbie Snelling, and Snelling's coming out next week, but Robert Gasser, and then Reggie Crawford, who talked about just recently focusing on pitching, no longer being a two-way guy with the Giants. But then coming out next week, we've got a crazy loaded call-up schedule with Matt Shaw, Robbie Snelling, Dylan Lesko, Dalton Rushing, all of them on the show for about 7 to 10 minutes apiece. Really good information. There's about another 10 more insane top 100 prospects that are going to be on the episode. I'll be putting it out over the course of like 2 to 3 more episodes on the call-up, but definitely go check that out. It's legitimately like 15% of our top 100 list. So I'd love for you to check that out. And speaking of that, the top 100 will be out relatively soon. So keep an eye out for that as well.
We are going to have a Just Baseball Show episode dedicated to the top 100. We will have over/under win totals in the American League and the National League. Just like we do every year, we pick every team against their number over/under on the wins. We will have our player awards episode, and I want to do X factors in each division. I'm very excited for X factors in each division because I think that there is an X factor per team that we can look at and say, okay, this guy can put him over the top. Spoiler alert, Carlos Rodon, I think, is the biggest X factor that we have in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, and well, it's not. No, it didn't look too hot last time out. So hopefully
X factor.
Hopefully we can get it going. And the Yankees fans are probably looking at another X factor already. But I agree with you, especially with what they're paying him and what they're expecting him to do and what we know he can do. So looking forward to all of that. Keep an eye out for the top prospect episodes coming out, continuing to put out those interviews and really fun stuff ahead on the Just Baseball Show. And of course, you can check out the website where we're churning out a ton of really fun stuff and really insightful and informational stuff to get you ready for this season, help you win your fantasy leagues. Go check out the Just Fantasy Show and all that good stuff as well. As always, thank you for listening. Look forward to talking to you guys next week.